pull yourself back after losses, and Anish was down. Anish was down two games and then came back and won 3, and then Wesley stops the bleeding with a huge rook-ending win. So here we go. This is fun.
Yep. We got some theory here being played by these guys. Usually this has to do with the fact that queen b6 gets played, and white plays this weird move queen c1. So this is why it's always a bit funny. White is going for stuff involving the b7 pawn, and the fact that the bishop on g2 is worth more than the structural imbalance. So nobody likes to have pawns that look like a2 and c4, but you're going to bring a rook to b1, and you simply have the more active pieces: knight b3, knight c5, knight e3, knight d5. White has more squares to put his pieces, but black's structure is simply more sound. So that's what we're dealing with.
I feel like we've seen this imbalance a lot, right? Both sides playing different positions in that, we'll call it the philosophical chess battle, right? Will white be worse in the long run because he has more pawn weaknesses, or will white use this really nice bishop and the active threats you said, knight e3, knight d5, now the rook coming to b1. And I love that kind of chess, right? Because it means you have the opportunity to outplay your opponent when both sides want something a little different. Black wants to squelch that activity and be better because he has weaknesses to attack. And we've seen that these guys can beat each other in those kind of endgames where there's really nothing to play for but a grinded out couple pawn weaknesses like we just saw Wesley do.
Yep. And we are going to see a pretty interesting game here. It's nice to see that both players are willing to go for both imbalances. We've seen Wesley take the weaker structure and go for the attack, even sacking a pawn earlier in that game, Danny. And then here we see Giri actually going for the split pawns here on the queen side, looking to potentially put a knight on d5 and use the queen and bishop battery that he's just set up against that bishop on g7.
Word, homie. Word. Sometimes you say things that are just so logical, all I can say is word. And yeah, here we get that knight e3 to d5, and he's trying to stare down that pony and say, I want the battery.
Yep.
But Wesley aware of what he wants, and he's just going to try to offer some trades.
We're probably going to see Wesley look to free his knight on c6 from that responsibility on e7. And if he can play knight a5, I think he's going to be very happy. But it is very difficult to free that knight. Maybe rook d7 is a consideration. Or knight f5, doing a similar type of thing. Knight f5 maybe with h5 to make that knight more secure. That knight's also looking at the d4 square, or maybe even like a long route to the c5 square. If black can control...
But we have to be careful of the e7 pawn, right? Especially when you've got fun ideas like the queen on this diagonal and, the e7 pawn being under the knight's gaze. So, because black doesn't really want to take here if he can avoid it.
Yep.
But this knight is really, really dangerously eyeing that pawn. And now I'm already looking at lines like I was going to say, can he go knight d4? And I thought maybe he could try to induce a trick where he gets to gobble up this pawn, but nothing really to it.
Look good.
Well, maybe he should have, because now all of a sudden Wesley strikes back. I wonder if Anish should have gone for that idea, because look at that cute little combination, everybody. Wesley So temporarily sacrificing a piece, but removing the defender of the knight on d5.
Well,
and look at this. Knight takes e7 check doesn't work, Amon, because when the knight recaptures, the rook now guards the knight.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the other thing is, after knight d4, it makes me think he could almost do this same trick. Knight takes c4.
Maybe he could have, yeah.
Maybe, but still, knight d4 looked more aggressive. I think he's just going to do the...
Yeah, he just accepts tucks his tail between his legs and says, I missed that, and now I'm down a pawn. So Anish...
You might have knight g4, maybe like lingering counterplay, and the queen is still on a6 out of play. It doesn't feel like a clean pawn yet, but it's getting there, Danny.
You know how much I love a mating net on the dark squares. There's only two things I love more, and neither can be mentioned. So let's focus on the chess.
Knight's attacked on g4.
Look at that. I mean, that's a double attack. That's a double attack by Wesley. A very creative way to defend and block the diagonal at the same time. So that was just nasty.
Yeah. But once again, this is just Wesley up a pawn in an endgame, and maybe Giri can defend this one, because if he can, and he does keep the rooks on. If Wesley goes to a queen endgame, I think he's winning that a lot easier than a rook endgame. But even still, going into a queen endgame here under the right circumstances, you got to be very careful as white about the rook coming to c2.
Expand on that for our lower-rated viewers. Why do you feel the queen ending offers better chances when black's advantage is the same? He has 2 pawns versus 1. Why does the queen endgame offer more winning chances than the rook endgame?
Yeah, well, we definitely know, no matter what our level is, the saying that all rook endgames are drawn, and we have better chances to draw rook endgames, simply because there's a lot of theoretical draws with being 1 pawn
Although
down.
we did just see a rook ending loss, but
Yes.
yeah, go ahead.
We did, and that's specifically because of massive exceptions to a rule that even these top players couldn't necessarily realize at the time. But with the queens on the board, you can kind of tuck that queen right behind your 2 pawns and sort of marshal them up the board
Right.
one by one, and that makes it a lot easier. And you can always trade queens, and you're gonna win the end game. So I think it offers a lot more options.
And yeah, I'll add to that by saying a part of the limitation of winning rook endings is because of their lack of ability to challenge each other, like on a diagonal, right? Or when you're the aggressor and you can win, you want to have a queen because you can help the pawns push, and at some point when they get stuck, your queen can inch forward in ways and maneuver in ways that a rook can't. So part of the reason we have that phrase, all rook endings are drawn, is because of their lack of ability to challenge each other, and positions just get stuck, right? I know that's a very general description of a sort of a geometry lesson, but yeah, on the chessboard, rooks can't always challenge each other, but the queens have a lot of opportunities to maneuver, and so I think that's why the queen endings tend to offer more wins as well, just to give a little bit of a geometry aspect to it too.
And why is he going for the rook endgame now? I think because the rook is not an open file for white. So queen c4, rook c4, black's threatening to play like rook a4, rook c2. And I don't think there's an easy way for white to liquidate. You know, if he could give away the a pawn for the a pawn or the a pawn for the b pawn, he would love that. But I'm not sure it's so easy to do. We might see rook a3, rook c7, and then play that position.
Yeah, or rook c a3, a5. It actually looks like that's what we're getting. And what's going to happen here is, okay, so black offers the opportunity to go into the rook ending. Wesley, going to the king and pawn ending. Wesley would be winning there. Oh, or maybe not. Okay, we're going to find out. This is a lesson that I give a lot of amateurs on, which is normally trading into the king and pawn ending from a rook and pawn ending is not the best way to keep drawing chances going.
I think he's just lost.
I think that was just a huge blunder by Anish. So honestly,
I think king f5, king g4 wins the game. If that pawn's on h2, much different story potentially. But I have a feeling that this could be lost. Maybe the move g4 now.
Now I think Anish agrees. He's leaning in, and so that's a fascinating thing to see. Amateurs who watch any shows. Or anybody who watches shows on Chess TV, you see we kind of highlight that a lot. It's easy to lose drawn endings by trading into a king and pawn ending, and a super grandmaster may have just done it before our very eyes if black is winning this endgame.
Yeah, the problem was rook b4 is such a strong move when he offered the exchange that rook b2 was coming, and he didn't like that rook endgame, but
probably if he had played rook e3, maybe he... but you're right. I mean, it's very possible. Obviously, Anish knows of these principles, and maybe he thought he was in trouble with that active rook on the second rank anyway. But I think he will go on to lose this king and pawn ending, and this is a game of... Or this has been a match of heavyweights trading blows, right? We've seen many runs put together by both sides, and if Wesley wins this game, which I think he's going to, he'll have won 2 games in a row. After having lost 3 games in a row.
He can actually just play f5, f4.
Yeah, that's the most simple.
That's the simplest, but king d3 does win if you just count the moves, so to speak.
Looks like he just comes over here and he's just going to gobble up the pawns and go on to win. Anish is losing and knows it, so he just resigns.
Yep. No, we're seeing Wesley put away